She is a national award-winning ceramics artist and the author of a brand new book that just came out. I'm going to give a little book plug right here. I'm excited about this. God the Artist, revealing God's creative side through pottery. I absolutely love her story, and she's just amazing. You guys are going to love her too. Her name is Morgan McCarver. Morgan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited about this. I was just telling you a little bit off camera that you're my first ceramics artist. You're definitely the first award-winning ceramics artist I've had. Uh, just kind of briefly, where did you grow up? Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from upstate South Carolina. So I call myself a Carolina girl because I've moved to North Carolina since then. So those are the only two states I've lived in, but I love them both. Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about the awards that you've won for your pottery, because I'm excited about that. I want to know more.
Of course. Well, I probably the most well-known in the area is I was in the top three as a finalist for the 701 Center for Contemporary Art residency program, which was in 2020. I was the youngest to kind of reach that level of being the top three. So I got to exhibit my work in the capital of South Carolina, which was really awesome. And then other things, I have won first place for a sculpture I did in I guess it was a couple of years ago now. But anyway, it was about COVID and kind of my response to that. And then I also have had stuff in different shows, national shows, as well as local, regional type things as well. And I have done two different residencies in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, and I will be going back again this summer for a third residency. So that's one of my favorite honors to be able to contribute to is being a part of that residency program.
Wow, that is very cool. And how you got into pottery is kind of an interesting story in itself. That's actually where this comes into play. Let's talk a little bit about your background. What was it that you had to go through that kind of sent you on this path?
Of course. Well, I've always looked for a creative outlet, even growing up. Both of my parents worked, and so my grandmother would keep me. And during those hours, I loved playing with homemade Play-Doh that she would make on the stove. And so that's why I say I got my earliest start with a clay-like medium. But then growing up, when I got into school, I really fell in love with dance, and that was my passion. I danced competitively for years, and that was my friend group, that was my identity. And all of that was really taken away from me when I had scoliosis spinal fusion surgery. So that involved a year-long recovery process, which led to me not being able to dance, losing that identity, losing that friend group, losing that creative outlet. And ultimately, that led me to pottery because I needed to express myself creatively, and I couldn't do it in the physical way I was used to. So clay really provided that flexibility and that personal relationship that I could kind of cultivate a craft as I studied it.
Wow. What was the first things you started making?
Oh, the first thing the first class I took was just a summer art camp, a kids camp that my mom signed me up for. And I think I was making everything from sculptures to functional pieces. And then from there, I kept signing up for more and more classes, specifically wheel throwing classes, which I was not very good at. And the book talks about that. It took me years to actually learn how to center clay. But that didn't slow me down. I just, would throw those wonky pieces and I loved them because those were the pieces that I made, and I had that connection to them.
Those are sometimes the best, though. I mean, they're going to be completely different from anything else that you're ever going to see anywhere because you did it and because it's not perfect. And we're not perfect.
That's
We're,
right.
we're not made to be perfect.
And I couldn't recreate those if I tried, honestly, because they are off-centered.
Right. I think they're fantastic. I told you a little bit beforehand that I've been really admiring your work. You were nice enough to send me a copy of your book. I loved reading your book. You also sent me your business card, which has this gorgeous, absolutely stunning set on the front with your information. And it's got this beautiful plate on the back. I mean, just your stuff it's eye catching. It's light catching. it captures the imagination and the heart, and just, oh, it's amazing. Do you pour yourself and your thoughts and your feelings into what you're doing every single time you make something?
That's a good question. And thank you for all of those beautiful compliments. I really appreciate that. But I kind of work in two different ways. I love the cycle of pottery and kind of how that works. So exactly when I am working on new ideas and new forms, I'm just pouring everything I can into it to get it perfect. And then when I kind of know what I'm doing, I've made this form for years, or I'm familiar with this design or technique, then I kind of go into autopilot and I'll listen to podcasts or audiobooks. So it kind of gives me a nice break. But I always try to give myself a challenge in the studio as well of just making something that I don't want to sell, something that I'm not making to make money. I'm just making it for me. So that's always a nice break. And those things usually lead into things that I incorporate into my body of work that I do eventually market and sell. But it starts with, what do I find joy making, and how do I enjoy this process? Because if I'm going to be replicating it to sell, then I want to enjoy what I'm doing, of course.
Very nice. Let's talk a little bit about this book cover. You have such a cool book cover. It's very rare that you find a black and white book cover that like really appeals to people, but this, it's so complex and so appealing, and it's that artistic side of you. I can already see that coming out. Um, the title being in the bright blue color, and just, oh gosh, it's just so pretty. So I'm looking at the one over here, but I'm also looking
Thank
at the one
you.
in my hands. How did you come up with this specific book cover? Was this a collaboration for your publisher? Was this something that you had any say in?
Thankfully, Morgan James Publishing did give me a lot of say in this. It kind of started with them coming to me with proofs that they had done, and me being the creative that I am, really wanted this to be as personal as possible. And so I said, I love these ideas, but I think I could improve upon these. And that really brought me back into the studio, specifically doing things to take photographs, because when I'm in there, I'm not thinking about how to perform appropriately for the camera. So that picture, actually, those are my hands, and I took that picture by putting my phone setting on a timer and putting my phone in like the pocket of my apron and bending over the wheel a specific way to snap that photo in the moment. Um, but yes, that blue is derived from the blue I use in my pottery. So there's all these little elements that are kind of brought into that, as well as different Easter eggs on the cover. For example, you see my signature stamp in the upper left, and I do go into that in the book as well, talking about signature stamps and what that means for a potter, as well as what that means, how God views us and signs his work, his masterpieces, which are us, with his signature. But those are my hands. That is a bowl I'm throwing on the wheel. And I really appreciate Morgan James for just letting me have as much say in this as possible. I basically designed about 4 to 6 covers, this being one of them. And they really liked this one and didn't really change anything. They let me have full autonomy in that way.
It stands out. I mean, I have a whole bookshelf of books over beside me, but this one stands out. It's very, very well done. You
Thank you.
designed it, and it just shows your creativity, because it's not anybody that can just design a book cover.
Thank you.
So, God the artist, have you always been a believer?
I was always raised as a Christian. I was raised in the church, and my parents are both Christians, but I didn't fully commit my life to Jesus until I was about 7 or 8 years old. But when you're that young, your faith is really what your parents make it. So I was being driven to Sunday school, being driven to kids choir, and my faith really didn't become my own until I had that scoliosis experience and realized I was about to go through a very traumatic surgery, and I needed some kind of hope. I couldn't rely on myself, and I couldn't rely on the doctors. And that's really when I started turning to prayer and seeking a relationship with God.
Wow. I remember when I was in school, when I was a kid, they had these nurses and doctors that would come in and look at your spine and try to diagnose you with scoliosis. And I remember all of the kids afterwards talking about, oh, I've got it. Did you get it too? Oh, yeah, we both got it. It's so bizarre to look back on that memory. And to understand that scoliosis was no laughing matter. Here we were cracking jokes and talking about it like it was a special club. It's rough for the people that really have it. What was your
Yes.
what was your recovery like?
Basically, not everyone has to have surgery. You're right, there are different degrees, but basically, my experience started when I was in fifth grade. My aunt had had scoliosis as a child, so my mom knew what to look for based on her sister's experience. And so, thankfully, my mom kind of recognized the symptoms, and that's when I started going to different doctors, getting opinions, and I started wearing a back brace to try to hold my spine or at least correct it if it couldn't be corrected, at least hold it in place. And I wore that for 3 years. And as I was growing, hitting that final growth spurt, my spine just kept twisting. And it was a triple S curve. So there was a curve in my neck, my upper spine, and my lower spine. Um, and they were varying by degrees and they were progressing and they were rotating. So my lungs, I wasn't able to get a full breath of air. There were different things. My organs were going to start being affected if this was left untreated. So I did have to have the surgery. I was 14 years old. This was back in 2011. And it was a really long recovery. I don't think mentally I was prepared for what that recovery process was going to be like because before the surgery, I didn't really have any pain. And I know everyone's experience is different, but it really was after the surgery, that recovery process, because they had fused my spine with 2 titanium rods and 18 screws, my entire spine. And so it evened out my shoulders, it evened out my legs. So all of these muscle groups and different parts, the tissues that were cut open to reconstruct my back, all of this had to heal and it took time. And it was a year-long process. And during that time, pretty much my whole life had changed.
Wow. There's a part in your book where I was reading. For people who have the book, they can follow along. But there's one particular paragraph when I opened up, it reminded me of something from my past. So I want to read that real quick, if you don't mind, and then share
Of
something from
course.
my past. Many ceramic artists compare opening the glaze kiln to the excitement of Christmas morning. I think that this is a great analogy, although I don't always agree. Waiting to open a kiln can be exciting and nerve wracking. The anticipation of waiting to see the results remind me of waiting for Christmas morning. The results, however, aren't always akin to unwrapping Christmas presents. I've never received broken art as a Christmas gift, but I've gotten that experience from a kiln opening. So when I read that, I actually immediately marked the page because it's like, oh, that brought back a rough memory for me, one that I did not even remember that I had. When I was in recovery from everything that I'd gone through, I was still living in California. I got a job in a ceramic shop and I
Mm.
loved this job. It was wonderful. I got to paint the ceramics. It was so much fun and I did so many cute things. And they taught me how the kiln operated. And I thought that meant they wanted me to run the kiln. And I got the heat too high. And
Oh
when I came
no.
back, all of those, those little ceramics that look like bunny rabbits and airplanes and yeah, all that stuff looked like a pancake.
Oh no.
I was so embarrassed. And the boss, rather than firing me, she had the grace to instead have me call all of the people and let them know what had happened.
Oh wow.
She said, "You're not going to learn if I just fire you and you just walk away. You're going to learn if you take responsibility for your mistakes. And I
Mm.
understand it's a mistake, but you can't ever let it happen again." And I kind of
Wow.
see life experience that way too. This is what we have to do. This is what we're called to do. This is what God has shown us is the right path. We can't just ignore that something has happened, ignore that we did something wrong. We have to take ownership and responsibility for it before we're able to move on from it.
Mm. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, I got that from your book and just that memory, and it's like, oh, I have to share that.
Yeah, that is traumatic, I'm sure. I have had similar experiences, not melting so much, but just different things, like the shelves in my kiln broke one time, and so I
Oh
lost a
no.
lot of pieces. Yeah, that was not good. I had some custom orders in there. So that's where it's hard because you don't know. You can't look into the kiln because it's going up to 2000 degrees or hotter. So you can't just open it and check on it. You have to wait for it to cool back down so you don't burn all the hair off of your face.
Oh, yeah. Don't be opening that up too fast.
Exactly.
So on your website, morganmccarver.com, what are people going to be able to find?
That is probably the central hub to everything. They can find my signing up for my newsletter there. They can find my pottery. They can shop my Etsy page or my wholesale page on Fair. They can also buy the book. They can see pictures of what I've done. They can read more about me. Um, and they can connect with me on social media.
You've got stuff everywhere.
Thank you. That's a goal.
I love that people can go out and buy your pieces too, whether it's Etsy, whether it's wholesale from Fair. They can have a piece of your artwork to display in their homes. It's just cool. And I
Thank you.
am going to make sure that we have your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your Etsy, your Instagram, your website, and all that stuff under the notes. But if you don't mind, I also would like to share a couple of photos of some of your art in this
Sure.
episode so that people can see some of the absolutely stunning work that you've done. What's some of your favorite things to make?
Oh, that's a hard question. It depends, honestly. It depends on my mood and it depends on what needs to get done. But probably the most challenging things to make are things that I just go in full risk and don't really calculate all of the little intricacies that could hold me back. For instance, my teapots are slip cast, and so that's a process where I make my own prototypes and I make my own molds, and it's the technique that I use the most. But that mold specifically is a three-part mold, so it's more intense, more intricate than normal molds. But it also, when it's all put together, it's a 50-pound mold, and it is a beast. I barely, that's like my weight limit of lifting. So I know it's going to be a challenge whenever I go in and pour that mold in the studio. So things like that just keep me curious and keep me trying to figure out better ways to make things that aren't quite so heavy. But it's always a fun challenge, especially with the spouts of the teapots, to make sure they really do pour and they are functional and beautiful as well.
Yeah. And they truly are. And that color blue that you use, it's very popular in some parts of the world, like that Delft blue, that kind of
Mm.
Dutch pottery and stuff. Did you find a lot of inspiration from some of that stuff, some of the historical
I
pieces?
d- yes, I did. And so when I was studying, I actually have a degree in ceramics. And when I was studying, that's really what I was drawn to, the Delft ware and how that plays into fine china that comes from Asia. And there's also a blue and white version of India ceramics there as well, incorporating that with Wedgwood and some famous brands like Wedgwood pottery, McCoy pottery. And then there's one in Spain that I'm sure I'd butcher the name, but it's something like La Cartuja de Seville, something like that. If you speak Spanish, I'm sorry, because I'm sure that's wrong. But I definitely am inspired by historical cultures, especially Victorian culture, because women had to wear those tight corsets. And that is something that is controlling their organic body, their natural
Mm.
body form. And I relate to that on a level of me wearing that back brace was controlling my organic form. Of course, theirs was for superficial beautification reasons, and mine was for medical reasons. But I'm able to connect with that, and really, my work is a commentary on the human desire to control the organic, from pruning flowers that grow organically to controlling the human silhouette, the human body. What does that look like, and what does that mean? And why do we have this need for control? Why do we have to control beauty? So all of that's kind of incorporated in my pieces.
That's fantastic. It has come to that point where I get to ask you my last few questions of the episode. And they're always going to be my favorite because the answers can change depending on what you're feeling like and what your day has been like. But my first one is, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And have you always been that way or has that changed?
Hmm. I am an introvert. I definitely became more of an introvert after my surgery because I had to carry a pillow around to classes and I wasn't allowed to carry my textbooks because I couldn't lift anything over 10 pounds for a year. So that meant I had special treatment, so to speak, in the classroom. I had textbooks there for me, so I wasn't carrying a backpack around. I couldn't sit at the normal school desk where the chair was connected to the desk, so I was sitting in the teacher's desk. So there was a lot of unwanted attention. My classmates and my teachers were great. It wasn't a bullying situation, but it was just unwanted recognition. And especially entering high school as a teenage girl with body image issues anyway, that's a natural form of growing up. And then with the back issues on top of that, I definitely became more introverted. And I actually didn't really talk about my scoliosis surgery for over a decade because I was just so uncomfortable with it and I wanted to be normal and I didn't want people to know. But after those 10 years, looking back and recognizing that God had given me that story to share and He had given me my testimony so I could discover ceramics and write the book, God the Artist, and show everything I went through so I can help other people who are going through similar things. I am becoming much more extroverted. I never would have done a podcast during those 10 years. But now, 13 plus years later, I love talking on podcasts and I love sharing my story. So it's beautiful to see how, while I'm still more introverted, God is really working and growing me to become the person I was before the surgery in a way. I'll never be that person, of course. I've changed mentally and physically, but just becoming back into myself, feeling more comfortable and loving myself more.
What a fantastic life you've had too. And I get it. I didn't talk about being a survivor of trafficking for a decade.
Mm,
I was not ready to talk about it. I didn't think anybody else was ready to hear about it. Now, why? What makes my story so important? Why do I think that I should tell my story? But you're right. He has given us those stories so that other people can understand, so that
mm,
other people can know. It's not our story just to bury it and to hide it. We're part of his design.
exactly.
Yeah. How do you celebrate your wins in life?
Ooh, um, I don't always slow down enough to celebrate them, honestly. Um, Usually, I am applying for a lot of different things and I get rejections all the time. So it's nice to have those wins. And I celebrate them by um, just fulfilling my duties, whatever that is. If it's shipping off my piece for that national show, I'm excited to do that and market that on social media. I will get dinner or something special sometimes, have a little treat or something. But honestly, I'm always just pushing forward, pushing ahead, trying to reach that next goal.
Did you have a dinner out when your book was officially published?
My parents did take me out to dinner. It was super nice of them. Yeah.
Oh, that's adorable. I love that. I love the supportive parents. That's cool.
Yeah.
And my very last question, always my absolute favorite. What is one thing that you truly love about yourself that's not related to your physical appearance?
That's a great question, because I haven't always loved my physical appearance, and there are still days that I don't. So I've come to recognize things that aren't physical that I have to remind myself. The most important one to me being that I'm a child of God and that God gave me the grace to truly find Him and to want a relationship with Him. And He has just continuously given me that grace and mercy to seek after Him and draw closer to Him. But also other traits that I love. I love my the speed I attack things with, which I think scares some people, including my friends and family. But I just never slow down. I'm just constantly trying to pursue things, and that's really what made God the Artist. That's what brought it into existence. Just constantly working at it, pursuing it, and of course, it couldn't have been published without God providing Morgan James Publishing right at the right moment, and that's a whole story in and of itself. But I think just the constant pursuit of perfecting a technique in ceramics, getting my story out there, sharing my testimony, and seeing what I can do in this life. I don't have, I don't have a whole long life like we did in the Old Testament. I've only got a couple decades. We got to get stuff done. You never know. So yeah. Why is it so important to be creative? Why did I write this book on creativity? Because being creative reflects God's nature. Simply, it honors our Heavenly Father. From our earliest ages, we are encouraged to be creative. We are taught silly songs, how to dance. Itsy Bitsy Spider is one of the first songs we ever learn how to sing, complete with hand motions too. Why? Sure, its underlying theme is about perseverance, but a 2-year-old won't pick up on that automatically. When they first experience, it's the creativity and fun. We are given a box of crayons or maybe some watercolor paints. Our parents might stick us in a ballet class. We build forts in our living rooms out of pillows and sheets. I doubt you can go a day in kindergarten without being creative. It's ingrained in our nature. Creativity allows us to express ourselves in ways that others might understand, including communicating things that we might not be able to share verbally. Think of cave paintings and hieroglyphics. Pictures are some of our earliest forms of communication and record keeping. And airplane safety cards include pictures today. They are essential for communicating with those who do not share the same language. Our creative results also help us better understand ourselves as we get older. Our artistic endeavors teach us who we are. While we are learning letters and numbers, we are also being taught colors and shapes. Why is it that artistic ability lies on equal playing field academically in preschool, but by the time we graduate from high school, most of us only take that one required art class for the credit? Where did we lose our artistic expression? Somewhere between elementary school choir and the SAT exam, we are taught that creativity and art aren't nearly as important as knowledge. But the crazy thing is that creativity requires knowledge too. There's color theory, music theory, line memorizing techniques, budgeting, etc. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with studying math, history, and science. I loved school and still love learning. My top spiritual gift is knowledge. I'm asking you to consider artistic ability as having equal academic validity to chemistry, geometry, or language arts. I mean, there's even an English class called creative writing. Art becomes a hobby, music is pushed to the extracurricular activities, and dance is categorized as a cardio event. Creativity has been watered down to follow the leader style, wine and painting classes, and quick crafts to support our mental health. Why do we turn to crafts for mental health? Because we don't get enough of it in our daily lives. We physically and mentally need to be creative. That is how God made us.
It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Morgan, it has been such an absolute pleasure having you on my podcast. I cannot thank you enough for being here with me.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really just awesome. And yeah, I love listening to your podcast. It's so empowering.
Thank you. And now you are the empowering voice that I get to share on my podcast.
Yay!
This has been a lot of fun for me. I appreciate you, and I just think you're awesome and such a good voice for God. More
Thank
people
you.
need that.
Oh, thank you so much.
Just a reminder, folks, remember to subscribe to the podcast because every subscriber helps me out in tremendous ways. And we will see you next time. If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please make sure you check out the episode description. You'll find links there on how you can learn more about this guest, links to connect with them on social media, and how to support the podcast. Remember, I don't get paid to do this. My boss is a bit tight-fisted, but I can say that. I work for myself.